Hi. Good.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Thank you for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I just have to say, I'm so honored and excited. I know I've been looking up to you for so long, and a bunch of my students, when I told them, were so excited. So I'm really, really looking forward to
Oh,
this.
well, likewise. I've loved getting to know your work, and I'm excited for us to connect and just share what you've been up to lately with your dancers and really how it ties into all of the work that I do. So, Jasmine, why don't you start off by just introducing yourself to all of the dancers who are watching and those who are going to catch this later
Yeah,
on?
totally. Well, so basically, I started dancing when I was like 3, 4, like most people at my local studio. And then my teacher asked me to try out for the National Ballet of Canada. So I went there, I attended the school, and then after that began dancing professionally. And I danced professionally for about 5 years. And now I'm teaching dance at a local studio, and I love it. I love teaching and getting to know that part of the dance experience. Being a student turning into a teacher is so interesting to see the other side of it, being a student for so long and being a professional dancer, again, being a student, getting to change the perspectives is so much fun. That's what I've been up to lately, and in the Royal Academy of Dance for the Professional Dancers Graduate Teaching Diploma. So I'm working on that now.
Oh, wow, you've got a lot going on.
Yeah,
That's
it's been a
amazing.
lot. It's so exciting and so much fun. And I never thought I'd be in school again, so it's been really fun and different to get used to, but really exciting and encouraging.
Absolutely. Jasmine, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you were talking about in regard to just having that experience as both a dance student, but also as a professional dancer, and really going right from your professional career to teaching, not necessarily having that gap in between. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what are some of those key things you like to focus on with the dancers that it's almost like I maybe didn't know this at the time, or in hindsight, that you're now preaching, to the choir and wanting to get out there in regard to information or just with your strategies and techniques.
Yeah, I think what's really been a huge eye opener to me is I think a lot of dancers, we all take everything so personally and so to heart, which is hard not to do because we do this because we love it. And it is like most of our identity, which is another thing. But it's really hard not to take things to heart. So, one thing that I've been really trying to instill in my students, being a student myself, taking corrections so I don't want to use the word heavily, but we can be our own worst enemy sometimes when you hear a correction. And I see so many students not overcorrect, but take it to heart so much and get discouraged. And a correction's not meant to, say you're doing this wrong or this isn't right. It's meant to help you move in a safe way. So I think really framing corrections in a way that students understand it is to benefit versus I mean, when you're young, when you're an adolescent, you're just thinking oh no, I'm in trouble. Like I did this wrong thing in ballet. I think especially being at a ballet school where the energy is very much you wear your leotard tights. It's very regimented and you're very professional in the class and you're expected to be so professional, and coming from that and knowing how seriously everybody takes every single correction as a teacher now. I also tell the students, if you don't get it the first time, it is okay. You're not going to get every single thing the first time. Just be easy on yourselves because, again, this is meant to help. It is not meant to hinder. It is not meant to send you into a spiral, which I feel like so many dancers do. And I think that's my biggest takeaway being a teacher, realizing how you say things is so much more important sometimes than what it is, even, right?
Mm-hmm. Such a great point. I think it's really hard for a lot of dancers to understand that concept. Like that's a huge growth period for dancers, right? To understand, and it typically, hopefully, should happen at a very young age where a dancer understands that a correction is not isn't necessarily coming from a judgmental place,
Mhm.
right? Yes, there are comments, like I posted about this yesterday. There are comments that can be made that come from a judgmental place, and that is a completely separate conversation.
Mhm.
But when we're talking about corrections,
Mhm.
it's so important. It's a huge growth um, point for dancers in learning that those corrections are an opportunity,
Mhm.
right? An opportunity for them to enhance on their current technique. And it sounds like that's a big drive home message for you with your students.
Mhm. I think also having that experience as a student, when I would take, like when I would get corrections, it would sit with me for so long, and I'd, ruminate over it for so, so long, and just it would drive me into a spiral. And then when I see my own students, taking the corrections, and I try my best to be like, okay, well, we're trying to get to here. Let's try to do this. But sometimes it doesn't matter how you say it. Kids can be hard on themselves, and dancers can be so hard on themselves. So really driving home that, okay, you're here now and you should be excited and really honor how much that took of you to be where you are now. Like even having the courage to step in the class and to be open to receiving corrections is so huge. So yeah, like you said, I think taking in corrections can be one of the most challenging things, but also giving the corrections can also be
Mm.
challenging. I think as a teacher, also knowing, okay, maybe let's say the student has this thing that they're working on, you also kind of have to be like, okay, they're working on this one thing, let's not give them 10 other things to think about at the same time. That's also been a huge learning with teaching.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I think it's also all of us dancers can relate to that feeling of when you do get a correction, and especially for us dancers who I call myself a recovering perfectionist, but for dancers who tend to have that perfectionist type of mindset, it's very easy for us to be in that place where we're applying, trying to apply the correction, but it's just like not working at the time. And immediately what comes to mind is like pirouettes, something like turns, where
Yes.
you're like going to keep going, and it's just they get worse and worse and worse. And sometimes you just need to like stop what you're
Yes.
doing, take a couple steps back and shift gears, and we'll get
Yep.
to that one later.
Totally, totally. Just like taking a breather, taking a breath, just sitting with it, like you said,
Yeah.
exactly.
Jasmine, I'm curious to hear about when you, whether it was in your training or maybe in your professional years, started to make the connection, just to get a little bit more into what I do as a dietitian for
Mhm.
dancers, when you started to make the connection between food and nutrition, and of course, your performance and how your body was really working as a dancer.
Yeah, so think I think like many dancers, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think a lot of dancers do struggle with finding a balance between having enough fuel and um not being so like restrictive with what you're thinking about eating before a show, for example, or before class. And I did have a period where definitely my relationship with food was not the healthiest at all. And I have grown so much from that because it really took being injured to realize, like, oh, I'm being consistently injured. I'm consistently sitting out of things because I'm in pain with this or have this injury now, to realize, like, oh, I should actually start to take care of my body because, like, a musician, it's your instrument. And it took me so long to get to that point. It took me until my adult years to truly get to that point.
Yeah. That's not uncommon for a lot of
Mhm.
dancers, especially as you said, right? It's really difficult for us to understand nutrition and the information needed to build a healthy lifestyle. And I use healthy with a lot of intent, because how we define healthy, really, there's a broad spectrum of how we define healthy, and how, and Laura, we're actually going to close out our conversation with this, right? And how we
Mhm.
redefine that word. But for many dancers, they fall into patterns of understanding that food is going to play a role, but gathering a lot of typically misinformation is what causes a lot of dancers to then start to have those obsessive thoughts, to be like, I
Mhm.
can only eat foods XYZ, I cannot eat foods ABC, because that's not what is, and I quote, allowed for dancers, right? And that's where we really fall into that relationship with food side of things, where things can quickly really spiral and become very damaging.
Mhm.
So it's really important that you mentioned that it wasn't until your adult years where things started to perhaps make a bit more sense, where applying nutrition became or continue to be a forefront in your training, at the
Mhm.
same time understanding that your relationship with food mattered also.
Mhm. Totally. And I think one really important, well, all of it was really important, but one thing that just really stuck out to me right now was how you mentioned that dancers earlier have that perfectionistic kind of aspect about them. A lot of dancers, again, not speaking for everybody, but most dancers like are very, they're perfectionists. And then I think that definitely plays into that role of food and their relationship to their body and their relationship with nutrition, because again, in class, I think traditionally in a lot of ballet classes, I am trying to change that so much as a teacher, because going through that in dance where you're told, well, this is wrong technique, this
Mm,
is right, this is the only way that you do this. I
mm-hmm.
think a lot of dancers kind of mold that mindset, and that plays into their relationship with food and relationship with nutrition. And that's just something that we need to, as educators and teachers and dietitians, need to break and to really challenge, because I mean, like I said, it lasted until I was in my adult years, like a really not solid relationship with nutrition. It wasn't, yeah, until I was older.
Yeah, for sure. It really drives or exacerbates that all or nothing mindset, the work that dancers are doing in the studio. Just as you said, like it's not necessarily that there's a right or a wrong way of maybe doing a certain step or a certain move or even showing a variation of a different type of artistry. It's just,
Mhm.
it's different, right? There's so many varying techniques and how one dancer is going to translate a piece of choreography versus how another dancer is going to translate that same piece of choreography, right? And I think
Mhm.
nutrition is very similar. It's We totally can fall into patterns. We see this a lot from what I call dancer diet culture, where we fall into patterns of just obsessing over, commonly it's obsessing over, and I quote, more of those clean type of foods, right? And forgetting that food can also be fun and food is part of our culture. And there's so many other aspects to eating than just making sure that it's fuel for dance. Obviously,
Totally.
that's a huge part, right? It's a
Hmm.
huge part in who we are as dancers and how we're fueling our bodies. But it's important to bring in that flexibility, and that flexibility, from my perspective, the food flexibility for a lot of
Hmm.
dancers comes in adulthood. And my goal as a dietitian is to help dancers really notice that earlier in their training, so they're not just getting introduced to these ideas in their adulthood, right? So that they're learning from a young age. And it sounds like you have a similar mindset, especially with your training for your dancers.
Yes, totally. And I think even when you mentioned there's so many aspects of food and nutrition with culture as well, that was one of the things that truly opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, I don't have to be so
Yeah.
regimented, because it wasn't until I started traveling, like I was in Europe and I was like, oh, I should enjoy these like foods that are iconic in Paris, or like all these
Yeah.
places that I was going. Like, why am I restricting myself to be like to basically punish myself? Like that's the only outcome of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like you said, trying to break the mold, I'm really trying to instill to my dancers, like, yes, food is also fuel, but also like enjoy it. Like it's it's literally what keeps us alive, but it also keeps us happy. Like, have some birthday cake, have
Yeah.
what makes you happy, and also make sure that you're fueling yourself. But again, when it all plays a role into that perfectionist mindset, it's so hard not to get to that. But it really comes down to, like I said, kind of how you say things in the studio. I think there's a lot more sensitivity in the studio than there used to be when I was a dancer. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way. And a lot of like dancers in our generation can probably feel the same way. So I think we're going in a good direction with that.
Yeah, language is important, and just how
Hmm.
we speak about food and how we speak about our bodies. And also, something that I like to drive home with a lot of my educators is that it's not that we don't want to have these conversations, right? That
Hmm.
drives a stigma in of itself, not bringing up these conversations around food and body, but
Hmm.
rather, and what I encourage is really having a neutral approach,
Hmm.
talking about food as food, not necessarily as what's good and what's bad.
Hmm.
And educators like you, I mean, I just have to thank you, because something that drove me to your work was exactly that. It was really helping to nurture dancers that have that flexibility and focusing more on sustainability with their training. So, my final question for you would be, how would you redefine what it means to be the healthy dancer, having said all of this?
I love that question. I think I think the answer definitely has changed in the last 10 years because I mean, I just turned 29 like a week ago, and I feel like in your late 20s, you realize so many more things. Not to quote, I forget who said that. I think it was like one of the Jenners or something. I just
Hmm.
learned so many things this year.
Hmm.
But it's true. When you get older, you just so many things click in ways, and I really try to preach that health, for example, is wealth, right? Health is so important, and health is not just what you put in your body and what you do to your body. It is your life. It is, did you get outside time today? Did you laugh? Maybe did you cry? Like, did you experience emotions? Did you literally live your life? Because I mean, not to be so like dramatic, but we have this one life to live, and you may as well live it doing the things that you love and feeling as good as you can. And yeah, you're gonna have like days where you don't feel amazing, but it's important to also honor that, but also listen to your body. So I think health is a lot to do with listening to yourself and honoring what you need in that moment and also being flexible. That's a huge aspect to being a healthy dancer and a healthy human. Being flexible, not physically, physically too is great. Practice your
Yes.
yoga, your stretching, but also like emotionally and being able to adapt. Like if I want to go out and have a nice dinner with my friends, I need to be flexible to be like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this with my friends. And, I want to also feel my body before a show. I need to also reward myself. But also, I want to go on a walk with my friends today. Maybe I don't have to go to the gym. Like just listening to your body, being flexible, and honoring what you need in the moment.
Yeah, so many important points here. It's such a big word, flexibility, and it's definitely one that I really drive home here
Mhm. I
within the
love
Healthy
that.
Dancer. So, Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me today. You really helped to instill a lot of this really good insight for our dancers, and I'm excited for everyone to catch up and, of course, follow you and learn more from you. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I had a great time, Rachel.
Yes, we'll connect soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.